Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here with my last Legacy of Yangchen Chapter analysis video. This one is going to be for Chapter 37, the final chapter in the book. This one is called Respite. So, getting into it here, some overall thoughts, and then we'll go through it. There's a lot on this final chapter. We've got about, 12 pages left in the book, and it feels like there's quite a bit that still needs to be done. At the very least, we need to kind of resolve bookmark the Jayson stuff and go back to the spirit world. We have to have a final Kavik and Yangchen scene, and then you do have to address some of the details from the end of the last chapter, because you didn't exactly say if, Shang agreed, though I suppose that was the kind of implication of it. So you have to address sort of where Yangchen is with regards to the Shang cities, the Platinum Affair. What are we actually doing with that when it comes to actually ending the book? Are we going to get a final scene with the full Yangchen team avatar? Are we going to get a final scene with Yingsu? Are we going to do anything more with Jayson and Kalyan? And the ultimate answer is that some of this stuff happens. Some of this stuff doesn't happen. Some of this stuff isn't resolved in the most effective way. And it feels a little bit frustrating that in so many ways, why is the book only 320 pages? Why isn't it 350, 60, 70 pages? Because absolutely, there's clearly some stuff that feels like it could do with a little bit more time. I haven't really seen too many people saying that they are particularly happy with the way, say, Jayson is kind of done at the end of the book. The way her defeat was actually done in the scene it happened in was great, but, it needs a follow-up. And the fact that we'll get to it here in basically the kind of first page in a bit, they're already kind of telling you that, oh yeah, stuff is going to happen, but it's going to be off screen in the future. And it's come on, that's not satisfying. So, still a good chapter. I think what is actually presented here is quite good on the things they actually decide to address. And I do think it resolves some of those character arcs in a nice way. But as an end to this jump into the Yangchen era, kind of like Shadow of Kyoshi to a certain extent, but I feel it's almost a little bit more of the case here. There's a little bit of a struggle about how to end this, in terms of, is it just ending this specific plot, or do you have to kind of wrap up this foray into the era temporarily? Whereas I think this book does end with the idea of, yeah, we kind of need a follow-up book to this, soon, but that's not going to happen, and that's frustrating. So, let's jump in here to the chapter. So, yeah, Yangchen confirms that, what Fei Shan said, it is actually true. Yangchen has let Jayson and Kalyan go free. She's actually here having a conversation with Ayunarak, and it's basically going back to the early stages of the book. This is where she and Ayunarak and Yangchen had their discussion after they saved her from the fog, basically, the first time. So they're in that safe house. Kavik is at the window, kind of keeping watch, keeping lookout. And basically, this is meant to be sort of, for the book, for this kind of instance, the final kind of report to the Order of the White Lotus. Yangchen has ultimately come out of the kind of this edition of playing the game on top. And so she has information that the White Lotus don't have, and Yangchen has won. The White Lotus have proven themselves not to be as good at playing the game as they said they were. And so you can see here Ayunarak is kind of disappointed. She's jealous of kind of the information and what Yangchen has accomplished. But, of course, because of the dynamic between these two, there has to be a little bit of back and forth. Every time I think you've reached the pinnacle of recklessness, you surprise me further. If Fei Shan finds Jayson, he'll extract the secrets of unanimity from her one way or another. Yangchen just argues that she won't be easy quarry, she's smart, she has resources to draw on, she won't get caught. And so, in a way, Ayunarak is kind of why are you so confident of that? Wait, you turned her. You flipped her into an asset. So, Ayunarak is able to kind of figure that out of, you can basically work with her going forward. You can find her, deal with her, and utilize all of the information that she has. That's how far it's gone. You haven't just sort of defeated her and then sort of sent her away to be on the run. You're going to use her going forward, and you know the details. I don't. I'm jealous about that. And that is the kind of whole idea here. We get the explanation here. The move was only possible after Jayson had fully been stripped of the leverage provided by unanimity. The conversation had been quick and taken place in the dark. Lengthy follow-ups would be needed, but those could take place later in safe locations. That's a bit of a frustrating line to hear when there isn't a final Jayson scene in the book. Yangchen had to give Jayson the immediate boon of collecting Kalyan from Taku and her child from Jondari before disappearing, or else her incentive to cooperate would be lost. So, I do like the idea that, okay, cool, they're at least putting the whole kind of family unit together. We get this confirmation that it is sort of the trio of Jayson, Kalyan, and their child on the run together. Because if you just analyze what was presented, you would almost get the case of, like, you know, how much of an actual connection is there between Jayson and Kalyan? It seems like it's there on his side, but is it there on her side? But I suppose we kind of get to see here, and I suppose as well, based on previous scenes, the idea that she kind of forgave him for, like, a just outright betrayal. And now she seemingly wanted Kalyan with her while they're on the run. It speaks to the fact that there is something there, but it still remains frustrating that in the book we never got a scene where Jayson and Kalyan talk, where, like, Kalyan interacts with his son, and it just feels like, why is this so rushed? Why is this like that? I understand this is a franchise where we have weird situations, like Iroh and Ozai have never had a scene together, but I think it's a little bit more kind of extreme almost in this situation, because these two are, like, implied to be in this kind of relationship, and it's such a focus of the book is, like, these two working together and then being in this relationship, and we just don't cover it. It is kind of weird. But we do get the idea. Love could sometimes be a weakness. Mercy could sometimes be cruel. But Yangchen has made this promise to both Jayson and Kavik that she will not let any harm come to Jayson's son. So this is where we kind of get the idea, obviously, that she has set up this situation where Jayson and her family's on the run. Fei Shan is going to kind of try and hunt them down, and that will give Yangchen space to operate. But it seems like Yangchen has made the decision that if Fei Shan ever does come close to finding them, she will step in to protect them, if not just to protect the child. That's the kind of whole idea in this. And this is obviously what points out the whole idea that, like, oh yeah, you could just kind of find Jayson whenever you need to get information from her. Ayunarak kind of points out, she's dependent on you now, her hidden accounts, the dirt she must have on business and political contacts, her research, you've snatched it all in one fell swoop. And obviously the idea is, like, she's envious, she's jealous of this information that Yangchen has access to, though Yangchen doesn't quite agree because there's so much to figure out about how exactly Jayson's network works, and especially with Jayson out of the picture, how it works, dealing with, like, the victims in a way of what Jayson has done, all of that stuff. She has the money, but there's a lot of work to do. In combination with what we also learn Yangchen is basically the Zongdu of all of the Shang cities. She's taken a lot onto her plate here, Yangchen. That's the whole idea here. Ayunarak does say, are you not concerned about punishing her for what she did? Kavik actually speaks up and says, retribution is for amateurs. I believe you told me that once, Executor. So he pipes up to say the snappy one-liner, and I like the description here. Yangchen could tell Ayunarak wanted nothing more than to hurl her agent into the nearest body of water, but she just casually gets up and walks out. You know, a fine example of maturity from their elder. But it's very much getting across the idea as we end this scene. Yangchen has beaten the White Lotus here. She has not had to reveal anything more than she needs to. I think it's kind of clear in this scene that this is also the idea of Ayunarak accepting that Kavik isn't really her agent anymore. He's kind of found his place, that in essence we will end the book with the idea of the avatar and companion dynamic is back, and it's probably maybe in a way fully formed for the first time. This is where Kavik needs to be. And it's probably the right idea of, like, the White Lotus realizing that they need to, you know, think about what they've done, the mistakes that they've made, and try and come up with a little bit of a different approach, because they were proven to be extraordinarily arrogant, and they really missed the mark over the course of the book in so many ways. So that's just the whole idea here. We then get to a scene with, of course, Yangchen and Kavik. They are heading for the Spirit Oasis because, she's finally going to do it, but with someone there to guard her body. But on the way, we do have a conversation. Kavik thanks her for what? It is, basically letting my brother, live. Because Kavik is convinced that, if we hadn't taken him down like this, he would have continued with the errand running and the way he did things, and he probably would have gotten himself killed. Pushed his luck too far and just ended up dead, because he would have just continued down that path relentlessly. This way, even though he's kind of on the run with his family, it will allow him to sort of focus on sort of the thing he's good at, which is he deeply cares and will protect the people that he cares about. And this just prevents him from being able to do the kind of errand running stuff, which is taking him down the kind of darker path. And he's just happy that, Kavik is happy that his nephew will have a family. And this gets Yangchen to thinking about the whole idea of, what sort of a situation has she set up here between Jayson and Feishan? And yes, the whole intent of this is Jayson is resourceful, and with Kalyan especially resourceful. They will, perhaps be able to settle down for certain periods of time, but they'll have to move on. They will constantly be on the run, as Feishan also uses his resources to hunt them down. But the main thing is that this takes two pieces off the board, because those two pieces are now suddenly playing their own game that barely really involves Yangchen. And so Yangchen has made the perfect move here by freeing herself up to kind of play the game on her own, with those two just busy dealing with each other. So it's this whole idea of, this is why Yangchen is now actually going to have the time to kind of, in a way, fix the world to a certain extent. She is the leader. She is the Zongdu of everywhere, but and now she can actually do stuff with that. So that's what Kavik says. So you're the Zongdu of everywhere. It mentions here it's a gross oversimplification, but it's basically heading in that direction. And then in what she says here, she basically says that yes, she has control over all of the Shang cities. She says, with the resources of every Shang city at my disposal, I can actually fix the problems in Bin-Er and Taku and many other places across the four nations. I couldn't end the Platinum affair, so I'm going to own it instead. And I think this is really interesting for her. She's kind of accepted the reality of the situation that, like we kind of addressed, I think, in the previous chapter or the one before that, her approach to dealing with the Shang merchants in a way was kind of slightly off, and she knows that she needs to adjust. She wishes she could just be kind of idealistic and play on the idea of we need to help our fellow humans and stuff like that. But in an era where it's all about buying people, it's about money and power, she's going to use the money and power that she has here to fix all of these cities. And that's exactly what she can do with control of basically four of the key cities of the era. That we know the likes of Taku and Jondari are very well off. She can just take the kind of excess kind of wealth there and put it into Bin-Er, maybe Port Tugak, that kind of maybe more needed. And so she can just even it herself if she has the kind of time to kind of work with it, which she does, because she's dealt with her main enemies in Jayson and Feishan, of course. So, and that's the kind of the whole dynamic here. Kavik is you don't need to convince me. I know you will do the right thing. So, we then get to addressing, they're heading for the Spirit Oasis. They're basically right outside here. And Yangchen thinks that okay, I'm making the right move here, taking help with me. And she thinks to herself, wait, taking help? Is Kavik doing this because he truly just wants to help me? Or does he feel like he has to help me? That's sort of the idea that Yangchen is thinking about here. She's basically forgiven him at this point. The whole aspect of the betrayal is resolved, as we saw with the rest of the team in the previous chapter. And she feels basically the same way. In many ways, she has been at this point for maybe a little bit longer than maybe the rest of the team. But she actually is really thinking about what kind of Kalyan said to her before. You're holding a knife to my brother's conscience. And how long will this kind of last for? Is he still just going along with things because he still feels like he has to balance the books, basically? And so she kind of tries to get at that point. We get like an interesting scene between the two of them here. She's like, you know how dangerous this could get? And he's just like, yeah, I dealt with the fog before. I was here last time. I know what to do. She says, you don't have to do this. You're back in my good graces. You have them. You've more than proven yourself to me and the others. The books are balanced. Like, you don't need to do this if you really, really don't want to. And he has to, again, look her right in the eyes and be like, look at me. I'm not doing this out of compulsion. In her head, she's thinking like, liar. Like, I don't know if I can trust you. You might be thinking something else within your head. And she's like, no, you still feel indebted to me. I'm calling it off. And he's just like freaking out, like, spitting spirits. You are so annoying. I want to help you because you deserve it. Do I have to tattoo the message across your skull? And it's like, there we go. That attitude, that banter, that sort of candor with her, that's the part of him that she can kind of like trust and really see. That's the kind of honest kind of part of him. And she's just like, okay, it's not out of debt. He does want to be here. So, okay, fine, cool, let's go. And so, yeah, we get the kind of moment here. They kind of sit down. They both assume the kind of meditation position, though Kavik is more ready for action. He's ready to get up and jump if, like, the spirit basically comes back. But we basically just get the idea that this time, with someone next to her who she can trust, she just meditates into the spirit world. She doesn't go in body and spirit. Just her spirit crosses over. It's more of your classic entrance to the spirit world here. And more than that, we actually see that she enters the spirit world in what seems like a relatively nice area. It's a blue forest that glowed with luminescence, which is obviously very different than the actual Fog of Lost Souls area with the talon-like stones. But they highlight that how she gets there, because she's, again, trying to find Jayson, who is in the fog, and the fog inhabits a specific area. She does kind of like the Zahir thing, where because she has like singular purpose in the spirit world, she can just think about where she wants to go and effectively teleport there. Like she morphs the spirit world around her to get to where she needs to go. This is kind of what's shown to be what the true masters, the people who are very comfortable in the spirit world, are capable of doing. That it is different than the physical world in that, in a way, the whole idea of like the distance between locations is an illusion to a certain extent, and you can just like get there by thinking you can get there. Interesting little detail there. But yeah, she's here. She's been through this before. As she arrives into the area, of course, the fog is down around her ankles, but she notices it's not trying to like dig into her anymore. Now, admittedly, she's here just in spirit form, so it's not going to be as having as much of an impact on her. But still, she's like, I think I figured it out. My past lives, the weight of them all at once, they're too much for you. They're too much for me as well. And it makes sense. Like, the idea of Yangchen is, if the fog takes over her, it's her, but it's also like her and 100 plus other people, all of whom are some of the most important people in the world with some of the biggest, deepest regrets in the world. This spirit who focuses on drawing out the worst days of people's lives and making people deal with their regrets. There's a lot going on with the Avatar, which is why it was such a struggle the first time, and how Yangchen basically survived the first encounter is just that the Avatar is almost too dense of a mass of regret for the fog to truly deal with unless it has like all the time in the world. And of course, she was still in danger, but she managed to break out of it because, defense mechanism, Avatar state, and all that stuff that we saw back in the earlier chapters here. But this time she's aware, like, okay, she has more or less kind of free ability to kind of walk through the fog here. So again, she encounters a lot of the people who are here, imprisoned here, dealing with their own regrets. She walks past them. And I like the moment that we get here where it's her looking at these people and realizing that what she is seeing here is, the suffering, the issues of humanity on display. Each one of these people had something terrible happen to them and they got imprisoned in here somehow. And in a way, each one of these people had an avatar during their era, and it kind of represents both the idea of like the failings of humanity, but also kind of the failings of the avatar, that the avatar was not able to save these particular people from ending up in the fog. And it's that what actually has the more impactful kind of impact on her. It's really interesting. But then she's kind of almost on the ground. She hits off basically someone's leg, and it's actually someone who's just asleep on the ground. And she thinks like, oh no, is someone dead here somehow? Can that even happen almost? But no, it is someone just peacefully at sleep in the fog of lost souls. And that's almost a more extreme thing than anything she's seen up to now. How is that possible? So she follows in a way the path of what turns out to be a bunch of people who are kind of like at peace, asleep, and she eventually finds a woman in air nomad clothing, sitting on a rock in the lotus position. This is Jayson at last. She has found her. And it's such an interesting scene here, because Yangchen, of course, this is the regret for Yangchen. This is what she's been dealing with for so much of her life. Her deepest regret, effectively. Feeling that I am responsible for ripping Jayson's soul out of her body, and she's now trapped, tortured here for years upon years in the spirit world. And now she's finally confronted with her sister right there in front of her. And what we get here is the contrast between how much Yangchen has beaten herself up over this versus the absolute peace and tranquility at which, Jayson finds herself at, and kind of basically has been at this entire time here. We basically find out Jayson is immune to the fog of lost souls because she can just be at absolute peace with kind of everything she has done in her life, and kind of dealing with her deepest regrets is not this dramatic thing. She's at peace with it. And in fact, Jayson can help other people deal with it. That's why there are so many kind of sleeping people around here. She is actually so strong, effectively, that her peace is able to put other people at peace in here. And that's the kind of crazy contrast, that Jayson has found a place for herself in the spirit world, in this crazy situation, helping people. And that, in a way, it's like helping people is what the Avatar does. Jayson is doing that in here. But the whole scene is great. So we just get like, Yangchen, what are you doing here? And Yangchen is just so emotional. Like, I'm so sorry for what happened. But Jayson's like, for what? The spirits brought me here after I returned you to the physical world. There's nothing for you to worry about. Her question broke the endless loop, and just finally getting like a response, and the idea that like, oh, like she doesn't hate me. She's not annoyed. She's at relative peace in this situation. Like, how do I deal with this almost? And Yangchen is just like, how do I free you? Is that what we're doing here? Kind of type thing. Free me from what? This place? Like, is it not obvious that you want to get out of here, basically? And again, this is Yangchen kind of like assuming the worst, but not knowing maybe the full situation. But she gets to see it in action right now. Someone wandering around is obviously dealing with their regrets. The fog is having an impact on them. And Jayson just kind of catches the person and puts them at ease, calms them down, and they basically fall to sleep. Like, you can rest now. And they calm down. And Yangchen's a bit like, whoa, like, you could do that? You can do that in here? It's so interesting, and Yangchen is just so taken aback by the calmness of Jayson in all of this. And she's just like, yeah, well, what are you doing here? And Jayson's like, I suppose I'm reliving the worst day of my life, watching my greatest fears, dwelling on my deepest regrets. And I like the line here. The noise that came from Yangchen's stomach wasn't a laugh. It was an expulsion of a darkness that had festered within her for years. Her sister was immune. And just this idea that we eventually get to of Jayson's kind of like spirit, in essence, is like, it's so mighty that she could share her peace with others, just as she had done with Yangchen in the world of the living. So very interesting stuff there. Just the idea of like, yeah, that's what the fog does. I suppose I'm technically dealing with that, but I'm not really dealing with it. I can help other people. That's what I want to do. And then she gets to turning it around and like, oh, I imagine you're able to do the same that I'm doing here with people in the human world, no? And Yangchen, again, it gets serious again. No, I can't. I'm no good at this. I'm ruining everything. And she's crying at this point. Like, this is the kind of real outpouring of emotions from Yangchen. That this is the conversation she is needed to have. This is the effective avatar and past life scene that we typically would get in something like this. But for Yangchen, this is like so much more important than if she was to maybe have a scene with like Avatar Zito or something like that. That issue has been dealt with in the first book. It's Yangchen and Jayson who need to have this conversation. She has needed to resolve this for years. That's why this one is so important. And Yangchen goes on and says, Jayson, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this anymore. I keep losing parts of myself. You, Nujian, I can't hold it together. I don't know if the world is worth it. It never changes. It never learns. And they just kind of, for a while, sit there, existing together. And then Jayson just says, like the big advice in a way that we're waiting for here, like given what Yangchen has just said, what is Jayson going to say in response? I hated you sometimes. And Yangchen's like, what? Like, why would you say that? And Jayson just continues, super matter-of-factly, frequently, I hated you. You were a little terror, a nightmare. I used to tell Abbas Dagmola that you'd ruined my life and I'd drop you off the cliffside when no one was looking. Again, what? I would say such things out of anger because I felt like I wasn't my complete self around you. Taking care of you was exhausting. I never had space. Being your guardian tore chunks out of me. Because of you, I ended up in a different shape than I would have untouched. But I loved you too. I loved you more than I hated you. Loved you more than life itself. Believe me when I say you were always worth it. And at this point, Jayson gets up, Yangchen gets up. They're now kind of staring at each other like face to face in the eyes. And she's like, sister, no longer little. You're afraid of failing. You're afraid of every success that might slip through your fingers. Every missed chance. You're so afraid of what the voices will say. Don't be. In this fog, there are so many people I can't help. I've only encountered a few of the many. Shall I abandon the souls within arm's reach? I think I'm where I need to be. Just like you're where you need to be. And then the final thing, this is their final line here. Your friend needs help. Wake up. And this is where Yangchen wakes up out of the spirit world. But we have to talk about that scene. Super, super interesting. Because again, you initially think there's a real kind of like gap between like what Yangchen said, in a way, what she wants advice about, and then what Jayson says to her. But I think the idea is almost that you're meant to like take what Jayson says. It's Jayson talking about her own relationship with Yangchen, how she feels about Yangchen. And I think you're kind of almost meant to apply, this is how you should view kind of your relationship as the avatar with the world, with humanity. The idea of, in the same way that I, as your sister who deeply loves you, I'm allowed to say that there were times when I hated you, that like it did alter my life, the role you played in my life. But that comes secondary. Those frustrations that happen from time to time come secondary to the fact that you are extremely important to me and you're always worth it. And now imagine that as like, this is what Yangchen's approach to kind of dealing with the world should be. You are allowed to be frustrated at the world and with humanity, specific people, instances. You're allowed to be frustrated as an avatar, that you want things to be a certain way, and in a way, they won't let it happen. They are their own worst enemy. They change you. You have to be a different type of avatar because of the way they act. But you have to always remember deep down that you have to care about the world. That is your goal as the avatar. That's what you have to do. And you have to view it as it's always worth it to try. It's always worth it to help people. And basically kind of saying, don't give up. And this gets into the more kind of like actual maybe advice part of what Jayson says. The idea of like, you're afraid of failing. You're afraid of every success that might slip through your fingers. Missed chances. And so the idea almost is that you see the one failure that slips through as a reason to kind of give up helping anyone. Don't take that path. That yet Jayson points out, I know I will never be able to help everyone within the fog. I'll never encounter everyone who's trapped in here. But I am absolutely going to help everyone who comes over next to me, the people who I can see and actually deal with. And that's what you have to do, Yangchen, as well, is deal with what you can and accept that you are just like basically human. You can only do what you can actually do. You are not kind of all powerful. You can't see every single problem. You don't know about every single problem in the world. Deal with what you can and accept that certain kind of failings will happen. Accept that, you will be frustrated and you will hate aspects of what you have to do. But you have to still try ultimately. And the idea is like her accepting that Jayson can accept, I'm where I need to be, and I can accept that this is not going to be this kind of perfect role for me, but I'm going to try every time. And that's the way you need to be in your role in the physical world. And right now, there is someone who you can help, who is like right next to you. Just wake up and help them. And I think in a way it's really kind of perfect advice, and it's in many ways I think it's actually quite similar to the advice that kind of Yangchen ends up giving to Kyoshi at the end of the Kyoshi books. It's this sort of like very kind of simple, just like advice that can help anyone, but it ends up being kind of the ideal advice that like an avatar needs to hear. It's also, I think, an important scene to kind of highlight, I think, for Yangchen, how Yangchen gets to, in the future, being this character who can then give such important advice to Aang about the idea of what it means to be kind of human, why the avatar needs to be human, and why they're not an all-powerful spirit entity, and the idea of understanding that all avatars make mistakes because they are human, and it's important for them to understand that if you're human, you can make a mistake even as the avatar. You can be understanding that the rest of the world makes mistakes as well, and that is such an important part of the role, and exactly why it's not an all-powerful spirit entity over the top of everyone. And I think that's a great kind of takeaway from that, is just everything beginning to come together. And Jayson's kind of advice here, what she says, being the thing that feels like it sort of almost like finalizes Yangchen's approach going forward to a certain extent. But we get to here, I suppose this is basically the final scene. Yangchen wakes up, of course, in the spirit oasis, and she's not affected by the fog. It's not going after her, but what it actually had done is it had found the barrier, the weak point where kind of Yangchen had crossed over, and it had come through into the physical world and is actually going after Kavik. And so Yangchen wakes up and immediately sees Kavik completely overtaken by the fog of lost souls, dealing with his deepest regret, the kind of worst day of his life, where he made the worst mistake he has made. And what he is saying and what he's repeating to himself is the sunbeam. He repeats this over and over again. The ship you're looking for is called the Sunbeam. This is the false information that basically Kalyan gave to Kavik to basically lead Yangchen astray. This is the nature of how that betrayal actually panned out. He views him actually kind of submitting that false information to Yangchen, the true moment of betrayal, as being the worst moment of his life. And I like how they connect this on like the next page. The idea that Yangchen almost wishes that she didn't get to see this presented to her so clearly. That she gets the fog opening up like the truth about kind of how Kavik actually feels about things. As basically the thing that Yangchen has never been able to see is like really see through Kavik. She now gets a window into his mind. And she wanted to finally be able to, I suppose, interpret that herself. She wanted to kind of put the effort in and finally really make the effort on her side to trust him. And it's an interesting way to kind of frame it as well. It's the idea that there needed to be an effort on her part to trust him. That's not a reflection on Kavik. That's her herself kind of being like, no, it's a cop-out in a way that I get to see that you are truly remorseful about what you did. You treat the moment of betraying me as being the worst moment of your life, your deepest regret. I now know for a fact everything you've been doing has been to kind of make amends. You truly do care about the kind of your dynamic with me. And I haven't had to work in a way to kind of see that myself. And I do like that over the course of the book, like there have been little moments like that where it hasn't just been all about Kavik betrayed me, he is the one who needs to do something to make amends for that. That there's also the Yangchen side of thing, of maybe realizing that, like, was I too harsh with the way I dealt with the betrayal? Have I treated Kavik maybe a little bit differently because there's this thing of like, I can't ever know if I can truly trust him or not. I can't tell if he's lying. And I've always put barriers up in a way in how I deal with him. And now she wants to make the effort to actually just openly trust him and kind of find the parts of him that just are kind of real, and maybe the parts where, oh, I can't see these aspects, but I can see others, and that whole kind of idea. I think it's a really kind of interesting way to sort of like even out the whole dynamic across the book. But how she deals with this, of course, is she just gets the water from the pool, of course, the spirit water, encases Kavik. They describe it as like it's basically what she and Kavik did to heal people kind of a couple of times. And this forces the fog out of him. She screams like, let him go. And eventually it goes away. It goes back into the spirit world. So they just kind of collapse to the ground, like exhausted after this kind of experience. And they just have this conversation kind of next to each other. Are you all right? I don't know what happened. Did you save me? Just returning the favor. Kavik says, did you find your sister? And I like this because it's simple. It's just, in a way, I did. She'll be fine. That's all that's needed. She can ultimately accept what happened in that situation. And I suppose going back to it for a little bit, the one thing I find kind of interesting coming out of that is obviously the idea of Jayson, and I suppose the nature of her being. So as far as we're aware, the way the fog seems to work is that it's these people's spirits trapped in the fog for all this time. And because of that, they are prevented from becoming spirits, like we seem to know can happen with the likes of the Painted Lady and Iroh. Spend enough time in the spirit world and you like kind of truly become a spirit. So the fog seems to prevent people from kind of undergoing that sort of kind of transformation to a certain extent. But the idea is that Jayson is still a prisoner within the Fog of Lost Souls. She hasn't gotten out of it because it's clear that she's still in it and she can see when people are truly affected by it and so on. Whereas it feels like you can actually escape the fog by like truly dealing with whatever issue you have. And the fog like almost like completely goes away to a certain extent, or at least it gives you the capacity to actually attempt to leave. So the idea seems to be that Jayson is probably strong enough, like she's comfortable enough with the her own issues or whatever, that she could probably just choose to leave the fog if she wanted to. I think that's the kind of idea they're getting at here, is that she isn't affected by the fog, so she doesn't have to stay here. But because the other people seem to get peace for a certain amount of time, but then they just kind of wander back in and the fog takes effect once more, she chooses to remain behind as this person to just help people in the fog. So you kind of wonder, like, is she still there? Like in the times that we've actually seen the Fog of Lost Souls in the series that we've seen, is she still in there? Or has she eventually left? Is there something that happens later in Yangchen's life where she maybe does free Jayson, or does Jayson evolve to become some sort of a spirit that we know later on? There's some interesting ideas that you could do with Jayson, but just that idea, they didn't really address that maybe more kind of like technical point of like, I guess she's just going to be a human spirit in the fog for who knows how long, and they're not really addressing the idea of like, will she become a spirit itself? But anyway, that's just that point. Then we get to the idea of she really wants to kind of just be super clear about everything. This is where we actually get the moment within the book where she notes that she wished she hadn't gotten to see the kind of window into Kavik's mind through the fog. Like that the fog with its spiritual powers showed her the absolute truth of Kavik, which was that he was truly remorseful for the betrayal. It is the thing he treats as being the worst moment of his life. So there'd been no effort on her part. She'd almost like cheated, getting such certainty of knowing like what he's like, and just clarification on, the situation with him and her, basically. And so she feels like, okay, I've got to balance the books here a bit. I used you and the others as part of a ruse in Taku. So she confesses the whole idea of the secret she kept from everyone. She actually confesses to him here in this moment. The whole Sparrowbone situation didn't need to happen, but I still used you in it anyway, and I never told you. And Kavik says, I suppose that's only fair, at least where I'm concerned. You do have to apologize to everyone else, though, especially Jujinta. So I like that. For Kavik, he's just like, sure, that's great, that evens it out, but you definitely need to apologize to the others. And Jujinta, especially given my experience with me dealing with sort of betraying Jujinta, even you, I think, will need to do a special apology for him, because he is very affected by that. He respects you so much. You'll need to do a good apology with him. So I like that reference, that Kavik is the one to note that as well. Him mentioning specifically Jujinta. And then she continues and says, I did it to protect Ying Su. And Kavik immediately has this moment in his head where he's kind of like, what does this mean? Like, there's all these revelations, because I'm guessing we didn't see a mention of Kavik in the previous chapter with Ying Su and the whole Feishan situation. So this seems to be the moment where Kavik realizes that Ying Su's actually alive, and he's like calculating everything, and then all of a sudden he's like, is she joining up? And Yang Chen's just like, I don't know, maybe. The firebender seemed to have appreciated making a difference on behalf of the Avatar instead of being exploited by a Zongdu, as sometimes purpose was better than money. Ying Su would certainly make a formidable addition to the group, but in the end, everyone had to decide for themselves. So, interesting. They don't fully commit to it again. We're on the last page here. Like, we're not getting another scene with Ying Su. But I like that idea that at least it's this consideration, and it seems like she's kind of up for it. Ying Su would like to do this. She also likes kind of helping people and being on a team for actually doing good in the world, compared to where she was kind of placed before. It's just, I suppose, a complicated situation of like using a kind of combustion bender like out in the open. But I think what's interesting about this is that it feels like the individual that is Ying Su, if she doesn't use her combustion bending abilities, I suppose can go sort of undercover in the world. And it's only like if they want to specifically use her abilities where they have to be more kind of cautious about hiding her and so on. Otherwise, they could just have her be a firebending member of the team. So I'd be very intrigued to see where they go with this, in terms of perhaps maybe not a absolute regular member of Team Yangchen, but like for the tough missions where they need the firepower, like I can definitely see them calling Ying Su in. And it being this kind of secret member of Team Yangchen. But there's a bunch of ways they can go with it. So I actually like that idea of like, oh wow, like we're not just hiding away the final combustion bender. It seems like she's actually going to like properly be a team member. And I think it makes sense that Yang Chen could help Ying Su to further master her technique, because it feels like that's the setup for Ying Su, is that she is the one who will probably go on to take the technique to the next level. Because again, Combustion Man and Pali are both drastically more efficient combustion benders than any of the unanimity members, because they can fire off blast really quickly. They don't need to do like 20 breaths, 10 breaths before they attack. They could pretty much do one blast, one breath blast. And obviously the whole idea of the tattoos seems to add to the efficiency factor. Is Ying Su maybe the one who discovers that with the help of maybe Yang Chen? That would be super interesting if that's the idea. There's also the mention earlier on that they do have the ability effectively to talk to Chai-Si at some point. So we could get maybe more of the secrets of combustion bending from Chai-Si and use it all together. Maybe there was a later stage version of the training that would take the combustion benders to another level. But we have to wait and see. And it makes you wonder, like, does that mean that, like, maybe Ying-Su goes on to, like, be someone whose, like, lineage eventually maybe results in, like, Combustion Man or Pali? Like, is there a direct relation all the way back there? That would be a kind of interesting thing to reveal, because it seems like if you are a combustion bender, you seem to know to get a tattoo somehow. How does that come to be? And how is combustion bending kept a secret kind of as we go forward? Because it doesn't seem like many people really know it exists in the world. It seems like in the Korra era, people are a little bit more aware of it, but that kind of seems to maybe be like the idea of maybe like Sokka really noting stuff about that technique so that people become aware of it in the kind of Republic City kind of era. But in like Aang's era, it did feel like, okay, like Combustion Man is this kind of known kind of bounty hunter guy who has this rare ability, but no one really seems to know what the ability actually is. So it kind of speaks to like how well known is it throughout the eras and stuff like that. But we'll continue on. So we've dealt with Ying-Su there. So the final thing is Yang Chen asks Kavik, "What will you do now?" "I'm getting out of the game. According to a Unarak, the heat's off me in the north. I can finally go home, see my parents. I asked the White Lotus if they could set me up as a healer's assistant. I'd enjoy that life." And I think that's interesting. That really speaks to, you know, Kavik as a character, that he kind of wants to get out of the whole errand running kind of business altogether. And he feels that he can be at peace assisting a healer somewhere to do what he did with kind of Yang Chen going forward, helping people. And where did he really learn that sort of like helping people is the kind of true thing that he kind of wants to do? It was through his experiences with Yang Chen. So naturally, Yang Chen acknowledges this. Yang Chen was the one who'd given him a taste for the job. "Don't do it," she said. And she basically grasps his hands, and then, you know, what does she do? She lets go and then smacks the back of her hand against his, and she's like, "Stay with me. I need you by my side. There's so much work to do, and I want you with me until it's finished." And so the final part of the book here, Kavik's laughter pierced the spirit oasis. Yang Chen had willingly delivered him the victory. She knew he'd been waiting for this moment since the day they'd first met. "Tell you what," he said, smacking her back, "I'll sleep on it." And that's where the book comes to an end. So very good from the Yang Chen Kavik dynamic, that we're ending kind of the kind of scenes on their kind of character arc side of things with the idea of finally, truly in a way, this is Avatar and Companion properly forming under like the right circumstances, in that all other situations in both books basically has always been, okay, I want you as part of the team because you have good skills, but you're more of an asset to me than anything. And then they kind of form a friendship, but the friendship is kind of weird because there was the more businessy aspect kind of like under the surface. And so because of all the betrayal stuff that then happened and the redeeming themselves for that betrayal, it was just never this thing where you kind of felt like, you know, have we ever truly got to the core of this ultimately, in terms of like, yeah, a scene like this with Yang Chen just being like, "I need you. I have a lot to do, and I don't think I can do it unless you are there next to me. Look at what we accomplished kind of doing all of this stuff. I need you as my companion, not as an asset or anything like that. I just need you in my life," is sort of like the idea of this. And so that's the whole idea of like, finally, she said the thing Kavik has been waiting for. This is this victory. This is kind of what he'd been waiting for this whole time. And he jokes, but, you know, the idea is he's going to accept this, of course. And so, yeah, we have Avatar and Companion kind of together at last. I think the problem here is that while it's a good kind of final moment for Kavik and Yang Chen to resolve that issue, ending the book on that moment, I don't think is a very good choice. To me, the ending of this book feels incredibly abrupt because there are so many points that are just kind of left like not explored. Like we're rather vague at the end about kind of, oh, what do we do with Ying Su? The tease of like more Chai-Si scenes. Like the idea is that like they directly tease that there are kind of specific things that like probably are going to happen within the next like week or two following the end of this book that it kind of feels we should know about. Even just the core plot of like where we started off, trying to fix things in the Shang cities. The fact that like we don't even attempt to kind of jump further ahead and kind of establish what kind of in a way is the legacy of all of this. Like we roughly seem to know that the Shang cities fade away, at least in terms of being known as Shang cities. So the idea, I guess, is that Yangchen just does a good enough job over a long enough period of time that the issues surrounding the Platinum Affair fade away as, I suppose, different leaders come into play. They all maybe decide to eventually end the Platinum Affair, and so world trade is just conducted by 4 cities known for trade, and they maybe continue to do their things, but they're no longer known as the Shang cities. And Yangchen eventually can maybe take a step back because all of a sudden the world trade doesn't need to be controlled by the Avatar necessarily anymore because tensions between the nations are over. There's the implication that that's probably where we go based on what we actually do know about the legacy of Yangchen in future eras of like, she is known for making a variety of different kind of like negotiations, kind of trade treaties between like nations and groups and stuff like that. And obviously I'm guessing somewhere in there is the ultimate success of what she does here in terms of like equalizing the Shang cities, it being controlled by one person, helping things. Effectively her taking control more or less kind of takes the power away from the Shang merchants and probably helps to move the world into an era where it's maybe not as much controlled by the kind of businessman type thing. But I just wish there was... This is where I think we needed maybe a little bit of a final kind of epilogue scene where we jump ahead a little bit more, because while it's great to end on a nice character moment like that, I almost wish we had gotten a scene where it's just, here's Yangchen, full confidence with her team, fully in place, they all trust each other, and we get a final moment for Yangchen, we get a final moment for Kavik, for Jujinta, Akudan, Taiyagum, Yingsu, like confirm if she actually is a part of the team. You know, to me, the final scene I would probably maybe want to do is maybe one of these kind of secret meetings with Chai-Si. And we get like a final Kavik Kalyan scene where they talk to each other. Maybe Kavik gets to meet his nephew. There's some development with all of these characters. Chai-Si maybe delivers a final reveal. And we just kind of get to like some sort of a resolution like that. Like the characters can reflect on, this is what you have done in the world, Yangchen. I don't think it's awful, but I think it's very clear that by the time we get to the final chapter, there's just too much to be done in just one chapter. And it is a little bit unsatisfying that the book kind of ends, and in a way that the fact that it does end on literally like, oh cool, like they're friends again, feels like that there just needed to be a little bit more. And why some sort of a decision seems to have been made in the background to really settle on the idea of these books can only ever be like 320 pages. Why we've really moved away from like, we can't even approach like Rise of Kyoshi territory and be like over 400 pages. This is a book that I think coming out of it feels like there's a few like cut chapters, cut scenes, or scenes that they just for whatever reason decided they don't need to do. But at the very least, I think there's a good like 40-50 pages that probably should and could have been in here to really bring things home in a nice way. And I don't think like 370 pages is too long of a book, because Rise of Kyoshi I think is still super well respected and it's the longest of them by a landslide. But you know, there is the discussion here on chapter 37. So, wrapping it up, I suppose, I will say there is one more video basically in this series. I technically have a little bit more Yangchen coverage still to come. most notably, I will point out that coming up on Sunday is going to be my Legacy of Yangchen spoiler live stream, where I'll do a big live stream discussion about the entire book, every aspect, full spoilers, everything open. Now that we've gone through the book in detail, let's just really get to the core of like what was good, what was maybe not as good in the book. So I'll be doing that on Sunday. By the time this video is like literally uploaded, I should have the full like live stream basically scheduled on my channel, so you'll know the time and stuff like that. Other than that, we still have the podcast review of the book ongoing. We've done the first third of the book, so there'll be 2 more podcasts over the coming weeks where myself and Greg go through the middle and then the final section of the book. And that will bring my long Legacy of Yangchen coverage to a close. So I suppose the first thing to say is thank you to everyone who has watched and kind of supported this series the whole way through. If you've made it through all of these videos, thank you so much for watching. But I also want to just reflect on it a little bit here and just highlight that it's always something I really like doing. It's a lot of videos in a relatively short period of time, but it's something I feel that like I want to do and that I kind of need to do, because I do feel like to some extent some of the discussion surrounding the books can get a little bit too broad, like attempting to just sum up your opinions on the book in one paragraph or kind of one tweet or something like that. It could be very difficult to sum up your thoughts on a 300+ page book in just a very small period of time, and you can forget all the details. That's why I do a video on every single chapter, is to actually highlight all of the details, the significance in a way of every single chapter, and the way the arcs actually go on a breakdown, like by a chapter to chapter basis, to point out all those details. And I know there's a variety of different kind of people who like this series for like different reasons. Some people just want the kind of detailed recap, basically, of each chapter that I do, with the little bit of extra kind of expert analysis added in. Some people more prefer just the kind of direct, kind of more opinion kind of stuff that I deliver, while also going through the recap stuff. And at least for me, the main takeaway that I kind of typically get by doing the series is that it really helps me to get to know the material better. That I can read the book, and that's great, but specifically sitting down to do a video and just take the time needed to go through and pick out all of the pieces from every single chapter, that's how I best get familiar with this book. And it suddenly becomes just as much a part of kind of my fandom, what I know about the franchise, as any other material in the franchise. That the novel information is just as important as ATLA episodes, as Korra episodes to me. And so getting to know them, this is obviously the most effective way to do that. So that's why I put the effort in to do 30-something videos in a month, because I feel if I took longer, and this was more like a 3-month project and we were only finishing up in like October or something like that, I feel the interest, the hype to a certain extent about the release of the book would be very low by the time we get to October. Whereas this way we keep up the pace, we keep the kind of intensity up, the focus on the book, and that way the series is complete early on, and people, as they get the book, have this full series there to watch if they want the detailed breakdown. So that's why I put the effort in, and will continue to put the effort in to do these kind of full chapter by chapter analysis videos, because it helps me, and I know a lot of people like it as well, because like I said, it can almost be difficult to find a good level of kind of breakdown discussion on the book. Like if you have gone through the book with a fine-tooth comb, it's very difficult to find just like a review that kind of addresses all the things you want to talk about with the book. And the whole idea of this is kind of in a way to be the Chronicles of the Avatar novel book club. That's what we're kind of doing here. Breaking down the book, seeing what everyone has to say about every single chapter. That's the whole idea here. So gonna wrap it up there. Again, thanks for watching, supporting this series. Again, live stream to fully kind of wrap things up will be on Sunday. But other than that, there is the chapter 37 analysis, the end of the chapter analysis series. So thanks for watching, and bye.